This morning we're going to talk about the stories we tell ourselves. Over and over again we're told in A Course in Miracles that we should not believe the ego, we should not trust the ego. We're told nothing so blinding as perception of form, which of course means anything that we perceive in our world. William Blake, in one of his wonderful poems, The Everlasting Gospel, and I quote this often when I teach, tells us not to believe the lie. And it's the lies that the five senses tell us. And of course, the lies the five senses tell us really have to do with the sensory data that are imported from the outside and fed to the brain. And as the brain takes all the sensory information and weaves stories around it. I always emphasize that we should never believe anyone who tells us 2 and 2 equals 4, because they're coming from the world's laws, the world's thinking, and as lesson 76 tells us, we are under no laws but God's. 2 and 2 in Jesus' world equals 5, which of course makes no sense here. But nothing makes sense here, because how can anything make sense here since there is no here? All right, but we believe we're here. That's the first story. We actually believe we're here. We have a story of our birth, how this happened. There's a sperm, there's an egg, et cetera, and people weave all stories about the union of sperms and eggs. Right? And then you have test tube sperms and artificial insemination and all kinds of other things that begin the story, we think, of our life. And then as we grow, we weave more and more stories about how unfairly treated we are, how parents that don't treat us right, how they do this, they do that, and then we have siblings that don't treat us right, and people and teachers and all kinds of things. And we're always weaving stories, and unfortunately we convince ourselves that these stories are true. And we convince ourselves these stories are true because the hero of these stories, just as Jesus tells us the hero of the dream is, the hero of these stories is the body. The hero of my stories is my body. And then there are all these other bodies in my dream, in my story, that I interact with. And of course, I reinforce your dream, your stories, and you reinforce my stories, and we actually believe these stories. We believe things happen in this world because of certain laws. So as lesson 76 tells us, and Jesus is really poking gentle fun at these laws, we actually think that a microorganism called a bacteria or a virus actually can affect us. Now, within the world story, that, of course, is true, because thoughts can affect bodies and things can happen to bodies. But if there is no body, at no single instant does the body exist at all, meaning in the holy instant there's no thought of separation, so there can be no thought of a separated body, then what is attacking who? Or who's attacking what? Nothing can be happening. But we weave stories. And all of these stories have as their central purpose to reinforce the story, which is that we separated from our creator and source, made up a world as a result of that, and all of this is real. It actually happened. Right? I sometimes say when I teach that the ego is the principle of the actually happened. Something happened. And the Holy Spirit is the principle of the nothing happened. Not one note in heaven's song was missed. That's the principle of the atonement. Nothing happened. But we make stories. Well, what's particularly helpful is to watch how we make up stories each and every day. Forget about the largest story of the ontological belief we separated from God. All the everyday stories. And these everyday stories have one core theme that runs throughout each and every one of them. Somebody or something did something to me. Someone or something did something to me to affect me, to make me happy, to make me sad, to give me pleasure, to bring me pain. And then we have all kinds of witnesses of our past experiences as well as current witnesses of other people perhaps, that my story is true. Right? And it becomes mandatory that my story be true because that's what reinforces, even though I'm not aware of it, the ultimate story is I exist. I exist as a separated son. I exist as an ego. I exist as a separated mind. And so what corroborates that story and reinforces its seeming validity is the fact that I have my everyday story. Yes, I exist, but somebody else did it to me. In other words, I'm innocent of all charges. That's what near the end of the text Jesus refers to as the face of innocence. The aspect acted on. Something out there has acted on me to make me this way. And we're not aware that the purpose of these stories is to reinforce the fact that I exist as an ego. So the way out of this is to let Jesus tell us another story. That's the story of the miracle or forgiveness. That's the correction that says, no, none of that is true. The real story is that you remain as God created you. The real story, even within the dream, that you are innocent. And because you are innocent, everyone else is innocent too. There is no one out there who is different from you that is hurting you or making you feel good. Everyone out there is the same. So the key in every one of the stories we make up about ourselves is how different we are from each other. People are sinful and we are sinless, or we see that them as sinless and we are sinful. But we always see differences, and these differences have an impact on us. The core of Jesus' story, the story of correction, is that we are all the same. Yes, it's still a story because it happens within the world of illusion, but it's a story that cancels out all the ego stories. And when we finally cancel out all the ego stories, then we come to the reality that is no story at all, that we remain the Holy Son of God that God created. But that's what we are always fighting against. And so it's helpful as we go through our day to look at the purpose behind all the stories we make up, and that we want to make up, and that we want unfair things to happen to us, because that reinforces the fact that we are different. We exist and we are innocent. But that's the face of innocence, not the true innocence. Jesus' story, which is what we always have the power to choose in the holy instant right now, is that none of this is true because we are all the same. We are all laboring under the same belief that the original story of the ego is true. We all have the correction story of the Holy Spirit, and we all have the power to choose between them. So as we go through our day, it's very helpful to recognize the ego stories and then recognize Jesus' story as the correction. Everything I believe is untrue. Everything I experience is untrue because it makes the differentiation of God's separated Son true and real. And the truth within the dream is that we are all the same. And that's the lesson Jesus would have us learn in his course.